Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jamalama Girivaradari Gopi Jamalama Girivaradari Gopi Jamalama Girivaradari Gopi Jamalama Girivaradari Yasodhanandana Rajajanarandana Yasodhanandana Yasodhanandana Rajajanarandana Yasodhanandana Rajajanarandana Yamutira Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Prabhupada, Jai Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Gaur Premanandi.
Hari Hari Bol.
Jam Vishvat Paramahamsa Parivrajya Jaya Saraswati Srimad His Divine Grace Shri Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami. Okay, today we're reading from first canto. And it's the 17th chapter still, which is entitled Punishment and Reward of Kali.
So
Text, huh?
you have 4
forearms?
Yeah. It's text 16, isn't it?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Is that one on the board?
No.
Okay. So,
Someone forgot.
Rajnohi
Rajanohi
Paramo Dhamma Rajnohi Paramo Dhamma
Rajanohi Paramo Dharma
Swadhamma
Dharma
Stanu Palana Swadhamma Stanu Palanam
Swadharma Stani Palanam Saswato
Nyan Yata Shastram Sasaton Nyan Yata Shastram
Saswato Yata Sasram
Anupadi Upatan Iha Anapajut Pataniha
Anupadiha.
Okay, let's try it along. I think nobody's got the verse, huh?
Your wife is ready.
Oh,
Fast
a
as I can.
little late now, don't worry about it.
It's already off the step.
It's almost done.
Oh,
Where's the stick? Where's that thing?
so let's do the word for word and then we can chant the sloka, okay? Rajnaha of the king or the executive head.
The king of the executive head.
He certainly Paramaha supreme Dharmaha occupational duties
Swadharmasta
one who is faithful to his prescribed duties.
One who is faithful to his prescribed duties.
Anapalanam giving protection always. Saswataha while ruling. Anyan others. Yata according to Shastram rulings of scripture. Anupadi without danger. Upatan persons going astray. Iha is a matter of fact. Okay, let's read the Sanskrit now. Rajnohi Paramo Dhamma Swadharma Stanupalanam Sasiton Yan Yata Shastram Anapajut Pataniha Rajnohi Paramo Dhamma Swadharma Stanupalanam Sashiton Yan Yata Shastram Anapajut Pataniha Rajnohi Paramo Dhamma Swadharma Stanupalanam Sasiton Yan Yata Shastram Anapajut Pataniha.
Okay. So that's Palana. No. Okay. Rajnohi Paramo Dharma Swadharma Stanupalanam Shatodu Yata shastram
Shashvato Jnanita Shastram
Anupadutta pathaniha
Anapadiyutpataniha Rajno hi paramo dharmaha
Rajyogi paramo dharma
Swadharmastanupalanam
Swadharmastanupalanam
Sasato Jnaniyatha Shastram
Shastram
Anapadi Utpathaniha
Anapadiyutpataniha
Rajno hi paramo dharma
Rajno hi paramo dharma
Swadharmastanupalanam
Swadharmastanupalanam
Sasto Jnanyata Shastram
Sasato Jnaniyatha Shastram
Anapadi Utapataniha
Anapadiyutpataniha.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you got the glare when you moved it up.
Depends on the angle.
Rajno hi paramo dharma
Rajno hi paramo dharma
Swadharmastanupalanam
Swadharmastanupalanam
Sasatananita Sastram
Sasato Jnanita Shastram
Anapadupatanaha
Anapadiyutpataniha
Rajno hi paramo dharma
Rajno hi paramo dharma Swadharmastanupalanam
Sasato Jnanyata Shastram
Sasato Jnanita Shastram Anapadiyutpataniha
Rajno hi paramo dharma
Rajno hi paramo dharma Swadharmastanupalanam Sasato Jnanita Shastram Anapadiyutpataniha. Okay, we already did the word for word. The translation reads, the supreme duty of the ruling king is to give all protection to law-abiding citizens or persons, and to chastise those who stray from the ordinances of the scriptures in ordinary times when there is no emergency. Please repeat. The supreme duty of the ruling king
Supreme duty of the ruling king
is to give all protection
is to give all protection
to law-abiding persons,
to law-abiding persons,
and to chastise those who stray from the ordinances of the scriptures in ordinary times when there is no emergency.
There is no emergency.
Srila Prabhupada's divine purport.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
In the scriptures there is mention of apadharma, or occupational duty at times of extraordinary happenings. It is said that sometimes the great sage Vishvamitra had to live on the flesh of dogs in some extraordinary, dangerous position. In cases of emergency, one may be allowed to live on the flesh of animals of all descriptions. But that does not mean that there should be regular slaughterhouses to feed the animal eaters, and that this system should be encouraged by the state. No one should try to live on flesh in ordinary times simply for the sake of the palate. If anyone does so, the king or the executive head should punish him for gross enjoyment. There are regular scriptural injunctions for different persons engaged in different occupational duties, and one should follow them, and one who follows them is called swadharma sta, or faithful in one's prescribed duties. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text 48, it is advised that one should not give up his occupational prescribed duties, even if they are not always faultless. Sit swat dharma might be violated in cases of emergency if one is forced by circumstances, but they cannot be violated in ordinary times. The state executive head is to see that Sit Swadharma is not changed by the followers, whatever it may be, and he should give all protection to the followers of Swadharma. The violator is subject to punishment in terms of the Shastra, and the duty of the king is to see that everyone strictly follows his occupational duty, is prescribed in the scriptures. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport in the 16th sloka of the 17th chapter of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, punishment and reward of Kali. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. I offer my obeisances unto His divine graces, lotus feet, for He has opened our eyes, which was certainly shut by the darkness of ignorance. When will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who has established within the material world the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give us shelter under His lotus feet? Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So here we hear in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the cream of all Vedic scripture, and the scripture most dear to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, our founder, Acharya of the Hare Krishna movement overall. We hear them, both the scripture and Prabhupada's purport, taken from the previous Acharyas, how they actually are pointing out the duty of people living in the world. So the scripture is not just to tell us about the spiritual world, but it is also telling us about living in this world. So therefore you have the Daiva Varnashram, the Dharma in the spiritual world, and you have the Varnashram Dharma in this world. And it's interesting, of course, I'm sure everybody found that interesting, that in times of emergency, the Dharma can be changed, or one may not follow the exact same principle, and Prabhupada gave a very vivid example of Vishvamitra Muni having to live off of dog flesh. Now that's not something he would do in the ordinary course of life, but whatever predicament he was in, obviously he had nothing else to eat, and to simply maintain his body and soul together, he was forced to eat that type of food. So that's the nature in this world. There's always going to be some emergency every so often, and things become disrupted, and people have to do what they need to do in order to maintain. But those are unusual circumstances. During the regular times, it's not really necessary. For example, today, there's ample fruits and grains and vegetables and milk products, and there's no need to maintain oneself by creating a slaughter industry whereby animals are simply bred and fed and kept simply for slaughter. So previously, when the first settlers came here, it was, although they started farming, and the Native American Indians, certainly different tribes formed, but there were many hunting tribal people as well. And the Europeans also hunted and supplement much of their food with the flesh of the animals that they killed by hunting. But back then in the 15th, 16th, and 17th century, there wasn't any slaughterhouses. It was simply people would hunt and then they would have to do what they had to do. But it didn't take long for this to be created in a place like America, which became an ideal place for capitalism or for simply people making profit. Giving everybody the opportunity to buy and sell goods or produce something that they could use to sell or distribute to others in order to make profit. And people, of course, soon started doing that in the food industry. Especially with meat. So instead of people having to hunt to obtain meat, soon they could simply buy it at a local store. Initially, of course, we know there was no refrigeration. They had other methods, and it wasn't as big of an industry until refrigeration was developed. And then all of their intelligence was applied to how to do this in the most profitable way, with little concern for the animal upon the day it was sent to market. Prior to that, they would take real good care to fatten it up. It's like a real crime in the sense of that the animal feels secure and safe. He's given all facility to simply eat and sleep, and in harsh climates, not even to be exposed to the weather. But then one day they just take you off, and at that time it's like all of the security is gone, and that's it. So, but even today it's even more ruthless, because the animal's hardly given any time to live. He's fattened as soon as possible through artificial means, and they're stuck without any range or pasture to wander on, and life has simply become hellish even from the beginning of life for these poor creatures. So what man has done, simply for profit, simply so that he may enjoy his senses by deriving wealth by such a horrible means, is certainly criminal and subject to the laws of God. If the chief executive head in these countries, if they're going to allow it, simply because they're taking tax dollars also, they're also enjoying in the wealth. If they're not going to do anything about it, then all of them are liable, and they will all suffer for it. In the scriptures it says not only the person that rears the animal or takes care of the animal and then sends it to market, and the person who kills it or the industry that kills it, but also those who distribute it, those who purchase it, those who cook it, those who eat it. They all suffer for the crime. Sometimes you see people, they think they don't suffer for the crime because they don't eat it, yet they may sell it or they may purchase it. So everybody has to suffer for the crime. At least, we know that, not by our own speculation on it, but that's what's described in the Vedas. So even if people don't have faith in the Vedas, then still they don't know what's going to happen at the time of death. Those of us that have faith in the Vedas, we can point at these ancient scriptures. They tell you what's going to happen at the time of death. And so it's very important for us to try to get this message out. We see Srila Prabhupada addressing it in his books, So in a very nice and friendly way, we can distribute the books, but for those who take the trouble to read them, then they'll find these things out in a very logical way and hopefully change their life. If not, people will go on suffering. They never really put it together on why, nature is taking such a toll on people with all sorts of natural disasters, and why other people as well as other creatures seem to be constantly attacking other people. And why is it that all of a sudden there's so much microscopic life inside of our body that is causing so many problems? That's one of the miseries of life, is created by other creatures, including microscopic creatures that are in our body and cause harm. And then, just troubles from our own mind. People, why are we so mentally disturbed in our culture? Why is the atmosphere like that? Why is it so full of greed and lust and simply bewilderment and illusion? Why do people have so many problems? Because we commit so many. The word used to be sin, and Prabhupada uses it very often. People don't particularly care for that word nowadays. Probably it's still acceptable to say, why is there so much bad karma? A lot of people, they don't even accept karma. They feel that if you say that, that's belittling the people, to even blame something on their previous activities. So sometimes it's hard to preach in such a sensitive culture where everything's wrong, but people don't want to hear that anything is wrong. They just want you to fix it, but don't blame anybody for it. Or you can blame some other people, but certainly, don't blame us. So what can we do? We just try our best to try to appeal to them in some way or another, to get them to at least do something that will lead to purification. With purification, we become a little bit more humble, and we can find some fault in ourselves. People become expert at seeing faults everywhere, especially in other people, but very seldom are they paying attention to themselves. We all have numerous faults that we can pay attention to, and we can work on that, but it's not an extraordinary thing for anyone to have a fault. But nobody else can really correct that fault other than the person themselves. Maybe with the help of their parents and teachers. They certainly don't need everybody picking at them. But most people, they're only going to pay so much attention to their parents and teachers in this world today. People, they're so narcissistic, just thinking of their own selves, that, basically it requires their own attention to try to improve themselves. And we see that happening a lot in the world. People are really taking an interest in improving themselves. And our Krishna consciousness movement that's one of the reasons it's grown, because people take an interest in improving themselves, making themselves better. And because we're presenting a culture of goodness, people can become much better by adhering to it. And so there's a great interest in it by a lot of people. Back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, people would have probably thought it was impossible in this part of the world. We've heard how Srila Prabhupada himself thought like that. So many people thought like that. This culture, has a superiority complex, and it's not going to change for any other type of culture. But no, we see that, that hasn't held true. Prabhupada came here and people bought his books, and gradually we see that there's a lot of changes going on in society. And, we can certainly attribute that to the modes of goodness. People are becoming more interested in becoming peaceful and all the other wonderful attributes that go along with that type of good sattvic culture. So the most important thing we can do is try to spread it around. We all in this room are familiar with how we do that through the distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books and so many other means, including prasadam distribution. And that way we're making the greatest sacrifice to help society in general. Alrighty, do we have any comments or questions that we can get back to John?
I don't want to be critical, but
Okay.
maybe you can help me with this. When you said it's a crime the way people look at society, do you think that Prabhupada accepted the people for what they were on all levels until they slowly progressed out of that state, and we can help them, even though it is a crime, they are still going to take new birth, even if they try to accept something about Krishna consciousness. Is that what you meant, as long as they make an effort, or if those people to the outside?
Well, I didn't catch the very first thing you said, but certainly I do believe that Srila Prabhupada accepted people for who they were, and he certainly respected people who were very dutiful and hardworking and honest. He appreciated all those things. He could appreciate the people in the Christian culture, the pious people, the pious Mohammedans. He certainly had a wonderful appreciation for piety. And he certainly didn't just ridicule people. I didn't catch exactly that first thing you said.
Well,
it was
just a flowing thing, but you answered the question. Just people, how it's a crime to be separate from the movement.
I don't know if it's a crime to be separate from the movement. I think I was just trying to make the point that it's a crime to slaughter animals.
Yeah.
That's a crime. To be separate from the movement, be separate from Lord Chaitanya. Everybody's separate on the earth until they become connected. That's the whole purpose of the movement, is to connect people. So until one becomes connected, they're separate. And some people may be advanced from their previous lives, and they have a great hankering to get connected to God again. And they think about it all the time, even from the time they're very little. And then there's others that they may know about it to some degree, but they don't have any inclination for it. And then there's those who don't know anything about it, and it may be a completely new thing to them. And there may be those who despise it. So there's going to be all sorts of people in the world, but all of them can make headway. We've seen, the devotees who have been, involved in the movement for just a little while. We've seen so many different types of people. It's such an interesting thing to see the people that Lord Chaitanya connects to Krishna again. I can remember, so many of them. Just this morning I was remembering this one devotee. I know a lot of devotees know him, but he's been passed away for over 20 years now. His name was Vandana, and he was right out of the ghetto. He was an overweight, obese African American, and he became a disciple of Yogananda Maharaj, and he was so dutiful. Every day he would go out to distribute Prabhupada's books. He didn't think there was no other way to help the world. And somehow ever, with all that ability to rap and to job, and he grew up in the ghetto. He was from the ghetto, and he could speak that language, and he could go out and sell books to these people. I remember he would come in late at night. He'd have his pants on, he had some slacks, and they were always very blooming because he was a very chubby person. And he'd have on some white shirt for collar, and it would be smudged with the dirt from his neck, because he'd been working hard and sweaty. And he'd come in and he'd count his money. It'd be just like stuffed in his pockets and everywhere. He'd pull it on out, and it'd be on the floor, and he'd sit there and try to straighten up the bills and count his money, because we used to have a safe. People would put it in a safe, and then nobody could get into the safe. So, and then many times you'd come in the morning and Varnashram had fallen asleep counting his money. And there he would be. And I remember one time he chastised me in the morning. He said, Yogindra, why didn't you wake me up? The roaches were crawling on me and bit me on the face. He told me. So, he was just all kinds of people.
He was very blissful.
Yeah.
He was always like...
Always seemed to be a happy person.
Walked in the room was a huge amount of, just bliss walked in the room.
Yeah.
A big ball of bliss. He was so intensely happy all the time. His only weakness was sweets.
Yeah.
That's what did him in.
Yeah, he had diabetes, the silent killer diabetes. Got to watch out for that. Another one was a Jewish American from New York who they sent down in New Orleans. But he had health problems. He couldn't control his bladder, so he was always peeing in his sleeping bag. He's a brahmachari, and I was a brahmachari, and we lived together. We were really good friends. And his name is real interesting. His name is Virendra. When you chant Gayatri Mantra, you chant that word, Virendra, because Virendra means the best of people.
The original one?
I think the original. I didn't know of any other Virendra.
Glasses?
From New York. No, he never gave glasses.
No, did he wear glasses?
Oh, thick glasses, because he couldn't
wow.
see. He was almost blind. He was like legally blind.
We became devotees around the same time in Brooklyn. I wondered what happened to him. I heard he had a...
Yeah, he did. He ended up passing away from a brain tumor. He loved prasadam.
After Sunday feast, all the leftovers, they would put it into a big merch, and we'd go and distribute it in the Bowery. But before we could do that, we'd have to get it from him, because he was eating all the prasadam. He was a little short guy. He ate all the prasadam. He didn't care what it looked like, what condition it was in. He just ate voraciously.
But he loved the movement. He loved to distribute Prabhupada's books. And he could go down and he could relate to the average Joe, so to speak. And he loved to distribute books to little black ladies. I mean, he was like expert. He was such a wonderful guy. I remember he went back to New York, and he would take pleasure in the movement. He took pleasure in the leadership of the movement. He loved seeing other devotees. He always saw good in people, and he just really appreciated them all. That was him. And then, later I heard that he had to go back to his parents. He had to go into the hospital. He had a brain tumor. Then he passed away. Before Prabhupada left.
Way before Prabhupada.
Yeah. Well, there's so many people,
Who are you talking about inside this?
Devotee named Virendra. Yeah, about that.
I just had a comment. Quick introduction. Thank you for the class. You touched on a lot of good points. In the beginning, you were describing some of the symptoms that we're seeing in Kali Yuga, and the necessity, you were saying, for improving oneself, of adhering to the culture, and you were saying like going through the trouble of reading and chanting. And you had mentioned that people in this age, generally, they actually do want to become more peaceful. That actually is a lot of people's desire, so it seems how it's so necessary for us to improve our own character so that we can, help those who are suffering. But in today's purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, and I just wanted to read that verse, share this with everyone. It's from chapter 18, the perfection of renunciation, text 48, translation. Every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore, one should not give up the work born of his nature, O son of Kunti, even if such work is full of fault.
Is it a long purport or short purport?
It's like 2 paragraphs.
You want to read it?
Sure. Srila Prabhupada's Divine Purport. In conditioned life, all work is contaminated by the material modes of nature. Even if one is a brahmana, he has to perform sacrifices in which animal killing is necessary. Similarly, a kshatriya, however pious he may be, has to fight enemies. He cannot avoid it. Similarly, a merchant, however pious he may be, must sometimes hide his profit to stay in business, or he may sometimes have to do business on the black market. These things are necessary. One cannot avoid them. Similarly, even though a man is a Shudra serving a bad master, he has to carry out the order of the master, even though it should not be done. Despite these flaws, one should continue to carry out his prescribed duties, for they are born out of his own nature. A very nice example is given herein. Although fire is pure, still there is smoke, and yet smoke does not make the fire impure. Even though there is smoke in the fire, fire is still considered to be the purest of all elements. If one prefers to give up the work of a kshatriya and take up the occupation of a brahmana, he is not assured that in the occupation of a brahmana there are no unpleasant duties. One may then conclude that in the material world no one can be completely free from the contamination of material nature. This example of fire and smoke is very appropriate in this connection. When in winter time one takes a stone from the fire, sometimes smoke disturbs the eyes and other parts of the body, but still one must make use of the fire despite disturbing conditions. Similarly, one should not give up his natural occupation because there are some disturbing elements. Rather, one should be determined to serve the Supreme Lord by his occupational duty in Krishna consciousness. That is the perfectional point. When a particular type of occupation is performed for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, all the defects in that particular occupation are purified. When the results of work are purified, when connected with devotional service, one becomes perfect in seeing the self within, and that is self-realization. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Comment or question? So everybody's ready to perform their work?
Despite all disturbing elements.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll run into some during the cow fest here or there, but everybody just stick to trying to make this a nice festival.
Nonetheless,
for all
it's
the guests and
to be joyfully performed.
yeah.
That's the secret.
Are you going to connect with Mr. today about the temple room and the porch, because they're really crying for cleaning?
They were just done yesterday.
I'm sorry,
This room and the porch were done yesterday.
the porch also?
Mm-hmm.
The porch is like
It has
this
to be
mud.
done every day. I swept it.
People walk on it, and there's dirt around it, so